Inside Washington, D.C. Jail, the hidden prison behind America's capital. Washington, D.C., is known around the world as the center of American democracy. Millions come here every year to see the White House, the Capitol, and the monuments that celebrate freedom. But only a few miles away from those famous landmarks stands a place that tells a very different story. A place where freedom disappears behind steel doors. A place where thousands of people have waited for trial, served sentences, fought for survival, and sometimes never left the same person they were when they arrived. Behind these walls, violence has erupted without warning. Riots have exposed dangerous conditions. Federal investigations have uncovered years of neglect. And for many inmates, surviving a single day became more important than thinking about tomorrow. What happens inside Washington, D.C.'s jail is far more disturbing than most people realize. Most Americans have heard about prisons like ADX Florence or Rikers Island. But few know the history of the correctional system that serves the nation's capital. Unlike every U.S. state, Washington, D.C. operates under a unique legal system. Its inmates have often found themselves caught between local authorities and the federal government, creating one of the most unusual correctional systems in America. Some inmates remain only a few days. Others spend months waiting for court hearings. Some are eventually transferred hundreds of miles away to federal prisons scattered across the country. Yet nearly every one of them begins the same journey through one place: the D.C. jail. And as this story unfolds, we'll discover why inspectors repeatedly described its conditions as deeply troubling, why lawsuits kept piling up, and why one decision made decades ago changed incarceration in Washington forever. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment sharing where you're watching from. It's always fascinating to see how many different parts of the world are following stories like this. A prison in the shadow of power. Few cities represent power quite like Washington. Every day, presidents, senators, judges, diplomats, and military leaders make decisions that affect millions of lives. Just across the Anacostia River, however, another institution quietly operates. Instead of lawmakers, it houses murder suspects, armed robbers, gang members, drug traffickers, carjackers, people awaiting trial, people serving sentences, people whose lives have reached a crossroads. The contrast is striking. One side of the city writes the laws. The other locks away those accused of breaking them. For decades, this facility has served as the primary detention center for the District of Columbia. Officially known as the Central Detention Facility, it is more commonly called the D.C. Jail. Unlike long-term state prisons, this facility functions primarily as a local jail. Most inmates are awaiting trial or serving relatively short sentences. But the stories contained within its walls are no less intense. In many ways, uncertainty makes life even harder. Because no one knows exactly when, or where, they might end up next. And later, we'll discover why many inmates desperately hope to leave this jail as quickly as possible. A different kind of prison system. Washington's correctional history has always been different. Unlike states that operate their own prison departments, the District of Columbia has experienced decades of shifting responsibility between local and federal authorities. For much of the 20th century, convicted offenders from Washington were often transferred to federal institutions or to the massive Lorton Correctional Complex in Virginia. Lorton became famous and infamous. Housing thousands of inmates, it developed a reputation for overcrowding, violence, and corruption. Escapes occurred. Riots erupted. Investigations uncovered serious problems. By the late 1990s, officials concluded that the system needed dramatic reform. Then came one of the biggest changes in D.C.'s correctional history. The National Capital Revitalization and Self-Government Improvement Act of 1997. The law fundamentally changed where convicted D.C. felons would serve their sentences. Instead of remaining in locally operated prisons, they would gradually be transferred into the Federal Bureau of Prisons. The decision closed Lorton permanently. Today, many convicted D.C. offenders serve time in federal facilities located hundreds or even thousands of miles from home. Families often face long journeys just to visit. Children grow up seeing parents through prison glass only a handful of times each year. Distance became another form of punishment. And it all begins inside the D.C. jail. Processing day. Every inmate remembers the first day. The arrival. The uncertainty. The silence. Police vehicles enter secured gates. Doors slam shut. One by one, prisoners step into a world controlled almost entirely by routine. Personal belongings disappear into storage bins. Wallets, phones, jewelry, belts, shoelaces. Everything is cataloged. Fingerprints are taken. Photographs recorded. Medical staff conduct screenings. Correctional officers begin asking questions. Not because they're curious. Because mistakes during intake can become deadly later. Does the inmate belong to a gang? Do they have enemies? Have they attempted suicide? Do they require medication? Should they be separated from certain individuals? Every answer shapes where they sleep that first night. Sometimes, those answers save lives. Sometimes, they don't. And as we'll soon see, the wrong housing assignment can change everything. Learning the rules. Every correctional facility has written rules. But inmates quickly learn another set exists. The unwritten rules. Those often matter far more. Don't stare. Don't ask unnecessary questions. Don't touch another person's property. Mind your own business. Respect personal space. Never appear weak. Inside jail, reputation spreads faster than official paperwork. One mistake can make someone an easy target. One careless comment can create lasting enemies. Many inmates arrive believing they can simply serve their time quietly. Reality proves far more complicated. Housing units become miniature societies. Everyone watches everyone else. Some inmates seek alliances. Others remain isolated. Every interaction carries consequences. Trust becomes one of the rarest commodities behind bars. Life inside the housing unit. Most days begin before sunrise. Lights switch on. Breakfast arrives. Cell doors open according to schedule. Movement begins. Some inmates clean their cells. Others exercise using bodyweight routines. Some sit quietly reading. Many simply wait. Waiting defines incarceration. Waiting for court. Waiting for meals. Waiting for recreation. Waiting for mail. Waiting for release. Or waiting for bad news. Conversations revolve around legal cases. Families. Rumors. Transfers. New arrivals. Old conflicts. The television often becomes the center of the housing unit. Arguments over channels sometimes escalate into physical confrontations. Something as ordinary as changing the remote has triggered violence inside correctional facilities across America. Because prison isn't really about television. It's about respect. And respect can determine who controls an entire housing unit. What happens when that fragile balance breaks is something we'll explore later. Who really holds power? Officially, correctional officers maintain order. Unofficially, power is more complicated. Experienced inmates often understand the institution better than newcomers. They know schedules, officer routines, blind spots, unofficial hierarchies. Some become respected voices. Others become feared. Certain inmates avoid trouble entirely. Others build reputations through intimidation. Not every housing unit operates the same way. Much depends on who occupies it. Gang affiliations can influence relationships. Neighborhood loyalties sometimes matter. Personal histories follow inmates through the doors. Old street conflicts rarely disappear simply because someone enters jail. Sometimes, they become even more dangerous. Because now, there is nowhere to walk away. And before long, we'll examine how overcrowding placed even greater pressure on these already fragile relationships. Overcrowding. For years, one word repeatedly appeared in reports about the D.C. jail. Overcrowding. Housing more inmates than originally intended creates problems that multiply quickly. Cells designed for one person hold two. Common areas become louder. Tempers shorten. Privacy disappears completely. Medical appointments become delayed. Mental health services struggle to keep pace. Correctional officers supervise increasingly larger populations. Every decision becomes harder. Every conflict becomes riskier. Inspectors repeatedly warn that overcrowding increased stress throughout the facility. And stress inside jail rarely stays invisible for long. It eventually appears somewhere. In fights. In assaults. In mental health crises. Or in decisions that change lives forever. The question wasn't whether pressure existed. The question was how long it could be contained. When the cell door closes. For most people, prison is imagined as bars, concrete, and locked doors. For the people living inside the D.C. jail, however, the hardest part often began after the cell door closed. A standard day followed a schedule. But emotions never did. Some inmates counted every passing hour. Others stopped counting altogether. Many arrived believing they would only stay a few days before seeing a judge. Instead, weeks turned into months. Court hearings were postponed. Evidence took time to process. Attorneys requested delays. Cases became more complicated. For inmates who had not yet been convicted of a crime, uncertainty became a punishment in itself. Every morning began with the same question. Would today finally be the day? Often, the answer was no. And when hope fades inside a correctional facility, frustration rarely stays hidden. It spreads through an entire housing unit. The reality of daily life. Life inside the D.C. jail revolved around routine. Before sunrise, lights illuminated every tier. Breakfast arrived first. Simple meals designed to meet nutritional requirements rather than comfort. After breakfast came medication rounds for inmates with approved prescriptions. Medical staff moved carefully through secured areas. Correctional officers remained nearby. Every movement followed strict procedures. Doors opened only when authorized. Groups moved according to schedule. Count times interrupted everything. Several times each day, officers verified every inmate's location. No mistakes were acceptable. A missing inmate could signal an escape. An extra inmate in the wrong area could trigger an emergency lockdown. Outside prison walls, these routines may seem repetitive. Inside them, routine is what keeps order from collapsing. Yet even the best routine cannot eliminate conflict. Sometimes, conflict arrived without warning. Respect is a form of currency. Money has value outside prison. Inside jail, respect often carries greater value. A careless insult. Taking another inmate's seat. Interrupting a conversation. Looking into the wrong cell. Small actions that most people would ignore can quickly become serious confrontations. Experienced inmates understand this almost immediately. New arrivals often learn the hard way. One former inmate later described jail as a place where people constantly watched for weakness. Not necessarily because everyone wanted violence, but because appearing vulnerable could invite exploitation. Every conversation became a calculation. Who could be trusted? Who should be avoided? Who controlled influence inside the housing unit? Learning those answers could mean the difference between serving time peacefully or becoming the next target. Violence behind the walls. The D.C. jail has experienced numerous violent incidents throughout its history. Most never made national headlines. Many were resolved before the public ever learned they occurred. Arguments escalated into assaults. Personal disputes followed inmates from the streets into custody. Gang rivalries sometimes continued behind bars. Unlike movies, violence inside jail is rarely dramatic. More often, it happens suddenly. A disagreement during recreation. A confrontation while waiting for medication. An argument over shared living space. Within seconds, officers respond. Emergency alarms sound. Housing units lock down. Medical teams enter. Investigators begin interviewing witnesses. Then life slowly returns to routine. Until the next incident. For correctional staff, unpredictability became part of the job. They understood something the public rarely sees. Some of the most dangerous moments happen during the most ordinary days. Officers under constant pressure. Much of the public discussion surrounding correctional facilities focuses on inmates. Far less attention is given to the officers working inside. Every shift requires constant awareness. One officer may supervise dozens of inmates simultaneously. They monitor behavior. Break up fights. Conduct searches. Escort prisoners to court appearances. Respond to medical emergencies. Handle mental health crises. Complete paperwork. Maintain security. And do it all again the following day. The work can be physically exhausting. It can also become emotionally draining. Correctional officers often spend years working inside environments where tension never completely disappears. Every unlocked door requires attention. Every unusual sound deserves investigation. Every silence can feel suspicious. Because experience teaches one important lesson. The quietest moments sometimes come just before the loudest. Mental health behind bars. Not every battle inside jail is visible. Many inmates enter custody carrying years of trauma. Substance abuse. Depression. Anxiety. Untreated psychiatric illness. Some experience withdrawal shortly after arrival. Others struggle with isolation. The D.C. jail has repeatedly faced challenges related to providing adequate mental health care for a population with increasingly complex medical needs. Mental health professionals work alongside correctional staff. Evaluations determine treatment plans. Medication is carefully monitored. Some inmates require specialized observation. Others need crisis intervention. Managing these cases inside a secure correctional environment presents enormous challenges. Because safety must always be balanced with treatment. When either side fails, the consequences can become tragic. A facility under scrutiny. Over the years, concerns surrounding the D.C. jail attracted increasing attention from oversight agencies, attorneys, judges, and public officials. Reports highlighted aging infrastructure, maintenance problems, staffing concerns, healthcare issues, sanitation complaints. Some inspections identified areas needing immediate improvement. Others documented longer-term challenges that had developed over decades. Public officials debated funding. Community organizations demanded reform. Correctional administrators work to address deficiencies while continuing daily operations. Improving a jail is rarely as simple as repairing a building. It requires staffing, training, medical resources, security upgrades, political support, and significant financial investment. Each challenge affects another. Making meaningful change takes years, sometimes longer. COVID-19 changes everything. Then came 2020. Like correctional facilities across the world, the D.C. jail suddenly faced an unprecedented challenge. COVID-19 spread rapidly through enclosed environments. Social distancing inside correctional facilities proved extraordinarily difficult. Housing units shared common spaces. Medical isolation capacity was limited. Staff entered and exited daily. Family visitation changed dramatically. Court schedules slowed. Health screenings intensified. Protective equipment became essential. The pandemic exposed vulnerabilities that many experts had warned about for years. Managing infectious disease inside a secure jail required balancing public health with institutional security. Every decision carried consequences. Every delay created new risks. The crisis drew renewed national attention toward conditions inside correctional facilities, including the D.C. jail. But what investigators discovered during this period would generate even greater concern. And that's where our story turns next. The weight of waiting. Perhaps the hardest part of incarceration isn't always the walls, or the locked doors, or even the constant supervision. Sometimes, it's waiting. Waiting for a phone call. Waiting for legal news. Waiting for a loved one to visit. Waiting to hear a judge announce your future. Outside these walls, life continues. Children grow older. Parents become elderly. Relationships change. Jobs disappear. Apartments are lost. Entire lives continue moving forward. Inside jail, time feels suspended. Many former inmates later recalled that this emotional uncertainty became one of the greatest psychological challenges they faced. Every passing day carried the same unanswered question. How much longer? For some, the answer arrived quickly. For others, it seemed never-ending. A jail under the microscope. For decades, many of the problems inside the D.C. jail remained largely invisible to the public. The walls did what prison walls are designed to do. They kept people inside. But they also kept many of the facility's challenges out of sight. That changed as oversight increased. Federal judges, inspectors, legal advocates, and independent monitors began documenting conditions with greater frequency. Their reports painted a complex picture. Some employees worked tirelessly under difficult circumstances. Many officers continued showing up every day despite staffing shortages and increasing demands. At the same time, inspectors repeatedly identified areas requiring improvement. Among the concerns raised over the years were aging infrastructure, sanitation issues, staffing shortages, medical care, maintenance problems, and the management of vulnerable inmates. The district government invested millions of dollars into repairs, renovations, and operational improvements. New leadership introduced reforms. Policies were updated. Healthcare systems were strengthened. Maintenance projects accelerated. Technology improvements were introduced. Yet changing an institution built decades earlier proved far more complicated than simply repairing walls. A correctional facility is a living system. If one part struggles, every other part feels the pressure. And perhaps nowhere was that more evident than inside the D.C. jail. The human cost. Statistics tell part of the story. Inspection reports tell another. But neither fully captures the human cost. Every inmate entering the D.C. jail leaves someone behind. Parents. Children. Spouses. Friends. Some families visit every chance they get. Others live too far away. Some relationships survive incarceration. Others quietly disappear. For correctional officers, the emotional burden can be just as significant. They leave home every morning knowing they will spend hours inside an environment where conflict can erupt without warning. Many officers speak about missing birthdays, holidays, and family events because someone must always be on duty. Medical staff face equally difficult realities. Treating patients inside a secure correctional environment means balancing compassion with security. Every interaction happens under observation. Every decision carries responsibility. The public often sees correctional facilities as places of punishment. Those who work and live inside understand they are also places filled with ordinary human struggles. Fear, regret, hope, anger, loneliness, and sometimes redemption. Can someone truly change? One question has followed prisons throughout history. Can incarceration truly change a person? The answer is different for every inmate. Some leave determined never to return. They earn educational certificates, complete treatment programs, reconnect with family, find stable employment. Others struggle almost immediately after release. Returning to neighborhoods marked by poverty, addiction, or violence often makes rebuilding extraordinarily difficult. For pretrial detainees, the challenge begins even before conviction. Simply spending months inside jail while awaiting trial can affect employment, housing, education, and relationships. When release finally comes, freedom does not erase those consequences overnight. Many former inmates describe re-entry as another kind of test. This time, there are no locked doors. But the obstacles remain. Lessons from the nation's capital. It is impossible to ignore the symbolism. Within just a few miles stand institutions representing justice, democracy, legislation, and incarceration. Courts determine guilt. Lawmakers write the laws. Police enforce them. Correctional facilities carry out the final chapter. Each institution depends upon the others. When one weakens, the entire system feels the impact. The D.C. jail has never been simply another detention center. It reflects broader questions facing criminal justice across the United States. How should society balance punishment with rehabilitation? How should aging correctional facilities be modernized? How can officers maintain safety while respecting human dignity? What responsibility does society have toward individuals awaiting trial who have not yet been convicted? There are no simple answers. Only continuing debate. Looking toward the future. The future of Washington, D.C.'s correctional system remains an ongoing discussion. City officials have explored proposals for replacing or significantly modernizing the aging jail facility. Supporters argue newer buildings could improve safety, healthcare delivery, staff working conditions, and inmate living environments. Critics point out that construction alone cannot solve deeper social issues. Mental health, addiction, housing instability, education, economic opportunity. These challenges often begin long before someone enters a jail. Correctional facilities deal with the consequences. Communities shape the causes. As policymakers continue debating the future, one fact remains unchanged. Every day, new inmates continue arriving. Court cases continue. Correctional officers report for duty. Families wait for phone calls. Life inside the D.C. jail moves forward, one count, one meal, one shift, and one locked door at a time. Most visitors to Washington, D.C. never notice the jail. They leave with photographs of monuments, memories of museums, images of history. Few realize that only minutes away stands another institution, one that tells a very different story about America. Not a story of speeches, but of consequences. Not a story of politics, but of people. Some guilty, some awaiting trial, some hoping for a second chance, others simply trying to survive another day. The D.C. jail has witnessed generations of human triumph and failure, violence and reform, neglect and improvement, despair and resilience. Its history reminds us that correctional facilities are more than concrete buildings. They are mirrors. They reflect the strengths and weaknesses of the justice system that created them. And perhaps the most unsettling question isn't what happens behind these walls. It's what those walls reveal about the society beyond them. Because long after the cell doors close, the questions remain. Thank you for watching. If you found this documentary informative, consider subscribing for more in-depth explorations of prisons, criminal justice, and the real stories behind some of the world's most notorious correctional facilities. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and thank you for being here.